How's it going, everyone? RipNtear from RipNtear Gaming, and I just recently got done playing the Ancient Gods DLC, and wow, it is a really fun DLC to say the least. It is very challenging and really does push you to your limits as far as gameplay goes. And in this video, this is just going to be my first impressions as far as how I came about with the DLC, how I feel about it, and I want to talk about a few other things as well as the gameplay, environments, maybe some parts of the lore. But keep in mind, this video will be spoiler free, so I'm going to try my best to make this video so that way if you're either on the fence still about buying the DLC, maybe this will help you in deciding to go through and buy it, or for those who already have played it to kind of see my side of the story and see how I feel about the DLC. Before I get going, if you are new here and enjoy things like Doom, definitely consider subscribing and setting up notifications so you can stay up to date with things that are on the channel. That is, of course, if you like what you see here. I really do appreciate all the support on the channel, and so let's try to get this video at least to 1,000 likes to really get it out there more. All right, let's get started. So as far as, like I mentioned, it's been a really fun DLC to play, and with the gameplay, like the first part I want to talk about would be like the mechanics. Now, there's really not a whole lot of things that have changed from the base game. We know that, we still have all of the weapons, everything's upgraded, you have all the mods, you have all the runes unlocked, and Praetor suit points upgraded as well. As far as the Doomslayer, everything's all ready to go, and you don't have to worry about any type of upgrades. Now, throughout the campaign, or at least the DLC, you do at least get the support runes. This is something I did talk in a previous video, so it's not really a spoiler per se. As far as with the runes, of course, they really do help with your play style. Now you can obviously, customize them the way you want. And of course, the great thing about the support rune is that not only do you have the 3 runes that you can have set up like you did in the base game, you can now have one support rune helping you throughout the campaign as well. So that's very helpful. As far as the difficulty, this is definitely a huge challenge. Like I mentioned, this is something where it's really going to push you. I honestly had to drop it down to ultra violence in my first playthrough because a lot of people are saying that each level is almost like a master level in itself, and that's definitely very accurate because I have found myself just struggling, and I died multiple times, and all for good reason, because I obviously learned from my mistakes and had to try to get adjusted to all of like the new not new mechanics, but the new enemies and just the way that the arenas are set up. So with this one, like, definitely don't expect the arenas to be anywhere compared to Doom Eternal, at least the standard game, because you're going to see a lot of like barons, doom hunters, marauders, and whatnot. It's definitely really different from the base game. Now, as far as with the enemies, now of course we do get introduced to new enemies, and I could really talk into detail as far as that goes because I don't want to spoil it, obviously. But of course, with the marauders, they actually weren't too bad. Now, of course, I did die a few times when I first came across the 2 marauders, but once you kind of get the idea of like knowing how to maneuver them and just kind of keep moving, the nice thing is there are zombies in there, so if you do need any ammo or armor, you can still take them out and help you out. But as far as with the 2 marauders, honestly, like, most people cheese them really easily. Like, I've watched some speedrunners like Zero Master and Bite Me, and they were able to take them out really easily. But once you get the hang of it, it's really not too bad. But as far as like throughout the other levels, the nice thing is that you do get introduced into new demons. That is a really cool thing about Doom Eternal, is that we do get introduced into new demons as you play. So in the base game, in the first level, you do get introduced into some of the basic enemies, like, the zombies, the arachnotrons, the cacodemons, and then you get into Exultia, and then you get a little bit more heavy demons, and then so on and so forth. They have done the same thing kind of in this one, just because technically there's not a whole lot of new enemies, but they do change it up as far as like other hazards or bosses of some sort. It does push you for sure. As far as boss fights, now I do wish that there were some more boss fights, but considering how difficult the levels are in themselves, I don't think it would have really balanced out too well if there was a boss per level. I think it does make sense because there are only 3 levels, and with the next DLC there'll probably be another 3 levels, and there might be 1 or 2 boss fights if anything. So I think id Software did balance that out properly, and really did set the expectations that this is still challenging throughout all the levels anyway. Moving on, as far as the music, my goodness, Andrew Holsholt and David Levy, like, they've done an excellent job with the music. And now for those who thought that like, oh man, it's not Mick Gordon, it's not gonna be the same, but honestly, the music is it just has that Doom feeling, and so it's just really hard to say that they are far from the feeling of it. The music for Doom Eternal is going in the right direction, and as far as the next DLC, the music will be just as great. And then if for the next Doom, hopefully Andrew Hulshult and David Levy still do the music, because that would be awesome as well. Another thing here to talk about is obviously the extras that you get within the DLC. So of course you do get a lot of skins, podiums, and other things like that. Now of course, once you first do buy the game, you're supposed to get the Maker Slayer skin. I know a lot of people did have issues with that. I had issues when I first played the game, and but now I was actually able to get it, and I think a lot of people have it now. But as far as that, you do get a lot of other skins from doing other achievements and whatnot, or even some type of challenges. So they do still kind of implement some type of challenges and ways to get you to try to have 100% in each level, which isn't actually too hard. The only thing I really wish they did have more of is the toys or collectibles. I didn't find any. There's no albums, there's no other things, which I guess makes sense, because as far as the hub is concerned, it's not entirely the same as the Fortress of Doom. So it's kind of dumb that they even implemented it into the DLC. And once you get into it, you'll see what I'm talking about. Well, moving on, as far as the environments, now id Software definitely went above and beyond with the environments this time, as far as the art and just the whole scope of the environments. Like the levels are just so expansive as far as the scenery, the backdrop and everything there. The skybox is what I'm meaning. And the levels and just the art that they've used in the game is just amazing, because they really wanted to push the limits of the id Tech 7 engine, I would say. Because one thing I wanted to point out, which was really cool of a feature, at least in the environments, I don't think this would be much of a spoiler, but in the first level, it is raining, obviously. But the cool part is that you see a lot of rain actually hitting your weapon, and then of course it's just kind of hitting it, it's dripping down the gun. And then if you also kind of just look up into the rain, you can also see the rain hitting your visor. So that's actually a pretty cool feature. Not a whole lot of games do that. When it comes to water I think is one of the hardest things to kind of create in video games, so maybe that could be why a lot of games just don't really focus too much on it. But I think it's really the small details that Doom Eternal has that just really sets it apart from other games. But as far as other things to really kind of point out, now there is definitely a lot more platforming for sure. So if you are not a fan of platforming in the base game, you're in for a rude awakening, because there is a lot more platforming. And I even got lost at times trying to figure out how to get to one platform to another. Just even on the first level, I had to try to get to a certain spot like at least 5 to 10 times. It took me a while, but of course it isn't too bad. If your first playthrough, that's when you're going to be really kind of struggling with it. But I think as you go on through your other playthroughs, it's not too bad. And it's the same thing as far as the platform and everything in the base game, like with like Mars Core and the other levels that have a lot of it. The first time you play it, it was a little weird to kind of get used to, but now I go through those like a breeze. It's not even that bad. One thing though I want to also talk about with the environments is the environmental hazards. Now in Doom Eternal, the base game, there weren't too many hazards as far as like explosive barrels or other like toxic water type of thing. Now it is cool that you can actually swim, which that's not really a spoiler, just because that we see it in the trailer, that is a thing. But of course there's a little bit more, obviously, acid water, I guess you could say, that you have to go into and get the hazard suit. There are other things that I didn't really like too much. For those who have already played it, you know what I'm talking about. But other than that, I think that is one thing I didn't like too much about the DLC. Is just a lot of the environmental hazards. I think it really did kind of ruined the gameplay a little bit for me, but it was just a tiny little pet peeve for me as well. Moving on, as far as with the lore, now obviously I will have a lot more videos down the road, of course, explaining everything as far as what was entailed in the lore, because there is a lot of codex entries that you can collect in this. I was actually really surprised with how much lore there was, and the nice thing is that this DLC connects a lot of theories and plot points, and I have been wrong on so many theories, but also right on a few of them as well. So sometimes it almost feels like id id Software is just seriously either getting their lore from a lot of Doom YouTubers like Midnight, Acid Glow, me, you know, and other guys, and that would be funny if that was true, who knows. But yeah, there's a lot of the lore that is explained in here, and this really helps for those trying to understand the lore in Doom 2016 and even previous to that as well. Now, of course, when the DLC ends, obviously it's on a cliffhanger. I'm not going to get into detail on that, but it was a really cool ending. I will obviously in a future video to go way in detail as far as what happened, what we can expect in the next DLC. But obviously with this one being part one, it's going to end on a cliffhanger. You know, a lot of games are going to do that. Like Halo 2 did that. You know, all the other games that have like a second or first one, they're in a trilogy of some kind. There's always going to be a cliffhanger, and that was definitely going to be a big thing here anyway. But they really set it up for the next one for sure. And now, of course, as far as my final thoughts go for the DLC, like I mentioned, you know, the difficulty is really, you know, it's really up there, so you may have to bring it down a little bit. But other than that, I think it's definitely playable. And for those who are new to Doom, I think honestly this is a great way to kind of get introduced into it, because if, you know, maybe you're short on money or whatever the case is, you know, $20 just to play the first part is really not that bad, or $30, well, US dollars for the whole expansion. So that'll be DLC 1 and 2. Now, however, I would highly recommend at least playing, if anything, the Doom Eternal base game, or even Doom 2016 if you are completely new to the Doom games, because that way you can at least get an idea of how the mechanics work, the whole movement mechanics, especially how glory kills work and runes and things like that. I think that will really help you out, and even with the lore you can kind of get a little bit more of a grasp of what's going on. But if you really don't care about all those things, and you're already used to first-person shooters and you're okay with, you know, the challenge, then by all means jumping into the Ancient Gods Part 1 is a perfect option right there. And that is a great thing I love about how id Software did that, is so that way they can try to get as many new players as possible, which is sometimes a challenge for other, you know, game developers. You know, when they do have a DLC, a lot of times it's not really a campaign DLC, so it's just multiplayer, and so really anybody can play it. But you know, for a lot of hardcore fans, sometimes it's not what they want. And a lot of the fans here wanted a campaign expansion, and that's what we got. And overall, I think it's an awesome DLC. Like, you know, of course, I might be a little biased on it, but there are obviously some pros and cons to it, and I've already mentioned those. But overall, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope I did kind of persuade some of you to either get the DLC, or at least you appreciated my impressions on it. Thanks for watching, and of course, be sure to like, subscribe, and share the video so we can get it out there more for those who are either still on the fence or just want to hear my impressions on it. But until next time, fellow Slayers, don't forget to rip and tear. Peace.